rencontrer simplement. Et tu n'as rien fait pour chercher à me plaire. Je t'aime pourtant, ton amour ardent. Rien, je le sens, ne pourra tu seras.
Gaming right now is in its honeymoon phase, and while the year before that had been a great year for gaming with games like Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok, none of us were expecting 2023 to be this good. I'm gonna go as far as to say 2023 has been the best year for gaming. It delivered an endless supply of games from different genres, and from big AAA titles to smaller ones that came out of nowhere and stole the show.
Yep, that's me. And you're probably wondering how I ended up here.
And before I tell you my top 10 and the reasons for it, I want to preface that by saying this is in no way saying that the games outside this list isn't any good. In fact, there are so many games that I loved playing which unfortunately are not in this list, but I did add in 5 games in my honorable mentions. So here are my top 10. Coming up at number 10, Cyberpunk 2077 2.0 and Phantom Liberty.
Welcome to Night City.
Now this is such a great story, not just in game, but also outside of it. How the game studio CD Projekt Red managed to pick themselves up from the huge fiasco of 2020 to have that belief to not give up and completely remake the game from ground up. This game finally feels complete. I mean, sure, it still has its fair share of bugs, but overall, they did an excellent job. And the icing on the cake? Phantom Liberty. A compelling story with brilliant performances. A brand new open world, Dogtown, which seems even more lively than before. Fresh off the heels of 2.0 update, this game was everything I had hoped Cyberpunk would have been in 2020. And I cannot wait to see what CD Projekt Red has in store for us with the next installment of Cyberpunk 2.
With my mug on me. Oh, DD, oh, what it is, oh.
I am afraid this game might be the first divisive game in my list. But look, for me, this game has been special. This game introduced me to Metroidvania style game. The 2D pixel art design didn't seem too convincing until a friend convinced me to try it, and I have to say I was blown away with the lore, the dark and gritty setting, the inhabitants and their storyline. Discovering a new NPC who can provide much needed upgrades to my kit, or stumbling upon some powerful spells to add to my arsenal were always welcomed, but nothing tops the feeling of figuring out where to go next. And I've heard from many that the bosses are not that great this time around. But after the dust settled and I moved on to my next game, the memory that stayed with me were these boss fights. At number 8, Final Fantasy 16. Now I gotta be honest, when I first picked up this game, I was a bit nervous. Final Fantasy 15 wasn't that great, and I didn't want this franchise to die a slow death. On top of that, Final Fantasy 16 was a paradigm shift from its predecessors, with designers from Devil May Cry, Final Fantasy 16 finally making the complete shift from turn-based RPG roots to an out-and-out action game. Full stop. With a Game of Thrones inspired story. I started playing this game around 10 in the night, and the next time I saw the clock I was 4 in the morning and all my doubts set to rest. And then there are these kaiju battles with some of the best cutscenes of the year paired with the best game music of the year, and you end up getting some of the most outrageous, jaw-dropping, balls out, over-the-top spectacle that I've seen in a long time. This game took me back in time and made me relive all the moments of the other Final Fantasy series, and just for that, this game makes it to the top 10 list of the best games of 2023. At number 7, we have a game that has come closest to be called Bloodborne 2. For me, that is enough to make it to my top 10. Anyone who knows anything about me knows Bloodborne is my favorite game. Full stop. So to get a game in 2023 which is nothing but a love letter to Bloodborne and to do it this good, yeah, wow. It's both praise and criticism to say that Lies of P follows the blueprint pioneered by FromSoft down to the finest detail, with precious few deviations. The aesthetics, yeah, it's identical to Bloodborne, and the combat, it's a methodical dance of attacks and parries designed with difficulty in mind. The sweaties are surely gonna love this, but where it really sets it apart is in its story, which is a dark version of Pinocchio.
Well,
But where this game did let me down a little is in its overly simplified level design. I was left disappointed with the lack of hidden locations, and also I did wish the game allowed you to pick up loot from defeated enemies. But where this game absolutely delivered were the boss fights. But here too, I did wish some bosses didn't have two phases. I think it was a little bit too overdone to force a higher difficulty. But at this point, I am just nitpicking. If you told me this was a FromSoft game, I would have totally believed you. And yes, it has its shortcomings and nowhere near as good as Bloodborne. But at the very least, it can fill the Bloodborne shaped hole that grows with every passing day. Any game studio wants to know how to make remakes needs to take notes from Capcom. While Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes were excellent in their own right, I was expecting 4 to be equally good, but then when I hit the start button on my PlayStation, I was not prepared for this exhilarating ride. And this game one-ups on almost everything on the original. The pacing has increased, the controls are much better, and because of this, the shooting feels so much more satisfying. Ashley, who used to be such a pain in the original, is much less irritating, with a better health pool so she doesn't die that often. All in all, Capcom has doubled down on the brilliance of the original design and fine-tuned the experience. The result is a stunning remake that reminds long-time fans like me of its brilliance, while also introducing an all-new generation to the modern classic and one of the most important games of all time. In a world full of remakes, this one gives a suplex to everyone else.
Here it comes!
Now this game is so rightly named cause it's nothing short of wonder. It is
Wonderful!
If you're playing this game solo or with your friends, this game is a bundle of joy you never knew you needed in a game. There is so much attention to detail here that it's astonishing to see them in action, like the way the elephant Mario squeezes through the pipes. And there are so many such small details, and they go a long way to make the experience feel like 2023. Even as someone who's played Super Mario since the very beginning, I found myself constantly surprised at the new twists this game threw at me. And the final sequence of this game might be my favorite Mario level ever. Missing out on top 3 by a razor thin margin, we have another Nintendo game, the legend itself, Legend of Zelda Tears of Kingdom. Now, release of a Zelda game is always a big event. The last Zelda game released way back in 2017, so the hype was unreal. And if that wasn't enough, Breath of the Wild is a hard title to follow as it showed what a Nintendo developed open world game could look like. Cometh the hour, cometh the legend. This studio did the impossible. It surpassed Breath of the Wild in almost every single way. The new gameplay mechanics are fresh and bring a new sense of invention, and with the addition of the Sky Island, the world is expanded even further to an extent that it truly made me feel, was Breath of the Wild actually that big? All in all, Nintendo has surpassed a game which looked like a Herculean task and given us tears of joy. In the third position, we have
Bow before me. Bow before the absolute. Bow!
Baldur's Gate 3. Now, I'm sure this is gonna surprise many of you. This was the game of the year, how dare you! So, while I wholeheartedly agree with the honors this game has got, I have my reasons why this is not higher in my list, which I'm gonna give shortly. A good dungeon master in any role playing adventure session wastes no time in getting to the point. So, let's do that. Just like the fantastical city it is named after, Baldur's Gate 3 is a soaring success. It's everything you have ever loved about any role playing game. No other game has given you this much freedom, and that goes from character building to combat, and the game encourages you to try weird things. And while we all know how good this game is, I want to come back to my earlier point on why this game is not higher up in my list. Unfortunately, the deeper you get into the game, the more linear it feels. The freedom that Act 1 lays before you becomes more and more constrained in Act 2 and 3. Conversely, the number of bugs increases dramatically.
Do you need something? Just the one?
And the load times, yeah, don't get me started. It is one of the worst of any game. It is clear that the first half of the game is where most of the polish was applied, but even now, months after its release and numerous patches, I am struggling to see how the near universal perfect scores can be justified. But having said all of that, this game still makes it to my top 3, or should I say top 4. Cause at number 2, we have a tie. Even after thinking long and hard into it, there was no single runner-up, and both these games deserve the title. Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake 2. Starting with Alan Wake 2. Well, let's rip the bandage off and not waste your time. This game is a must-play, a masterpiece, and boy was it worth the wait. It's a psychological horror that doesn't shy away from the audiences and comes in with all the gore that a survival horror game of this nature warrants. The fantastically detailed graphics are impressive throughout. More so, the animations of the characters, whose appearances are so realistic, and their movements and facial expressions so believable that the game is able to blend in engine interactions with live action sequences near seamlessly. Sure, this game does require beefy graphics. I mean, my 3080 could only hit medium to high settings, but even then the game looked gorgeous. You know somebody else who equally looked gorgeous? It's our very own friendly neighborhood SpiderMan. This year was truly a year of remakes and sequels, but unlike in the movies, gaming sequels have lived up to the hype. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 stands at the pinnacle of gaming excellence, even in the shadow of its predecessors, Miles Morales and the initial Spider-Man game. This sequel outshines them with its dynamic city, compelling narrative of Peter Parker, and the emerging hero Miles Morales. And of course, how can you forget the introduction of Insomniac's version of I played the first Spider-Man in 2018 and the spin-off Miles Morales, both of which I really loved. Now, before I go any further, I want to get my bias out of the way. I am a huge superhero fan, so I have played them all. The good, the bad, and the ugly. But this one, yeah, this one was better than good. It was great. If anything, this game is a love letter to the comic book fan in me with over-the-top storyline, classic villains, and fight sequences that you will remember for a very long time. I also want to touch upon the complex story, the story of Peter Parker and the power you feel with the symbiote suit and how that literally destroys his life. And to see that through the perspective of Miles Morales, seeing his friend go through this. This game is both satisfying for the video game lover in me and the comic book lover in me, which is no small feat. And before I give you my numero uno, which might surprise many, I want to give a shout out to 5 games which almost made it to my top 10. Lords of the Fallen. Hi-Fi Rush.
Bring it on. Whew. Pretty rock star move, Chai.
Armored Core 6. Star Wars Jedi Survivor.
Thanks, Bode. Part of the job, Custis. As long as we fight.
Diablo 4. And finally, my number 1, Hogwarts Legacy. Now, where do I start with this? Firstly, I completely understand if you disagree with my number 1. Gaming is such a subjective topic, so if you think Armored Core 6 was your favorite game, or maybe Alan Wake 2, I completely and wholeheartedly respect your views. Hogwarts Legacy sold 24 freaking million copies worldwide and went on to become the most successful game of last year. You don't reach such figures unless the game was loved by a large portion of the gaming community. Yet, this game was completely snubbed, first by the so-called journalists and second by the Game Awards. I mean, 0 nominations. Just because of what J.K. Rowling said about the community? Come on, irrespective of your views on that, Hogwarts Legacy should be judged based on the quality of the game. I am so glad that the magic of the books has finally been captured in a game, and for me the story is just a sideshow. I was just glad being in that world, whether I was walking around the corridors of Hogwarts School or exploring the swamps lit only by the Lumos spell. I think when it comes to open world games, as far as the open world goes, Hogwarts Legacy was the very best. One thing I was really worried about was the combat. When you see the combat in movies, it just doesn't seem exciting. But thankfully, this game has a very good combat system. There are different spells that you can use. There's a deflect system which is very satisfying. Plus, you can use potions for attack or defense. Or you can even toss around some plants. The animation, that's top notch too. And you can go full Voldemort mode and learn some unforgivable spells if you like. And if all of that wasn't enough, you have your own personal space as well in Room of Requirement, which you can decorate as per your liking, craft your own potions, and even groom fantastic beasts. This game is such a difficult challenge to take. The Harry Potter fans will criticize and scrutinize your every move, and also to bring in fans of gaming who don't really care about the Harry Potter world but enjoy a good RPG game. And I think this game has hit that sweet spot, and it's truly commendable for the studio to go all in and make a masterpiece that even the spin-off movies have not been able to achieve. So that's it folks. You like it? You don't like it? Comment below and let me know. And if you appreciate this video and for everything gaming, a like and a sub would be simply lovely.